Warm. You don't need louder arguments. You need sharper questions. Picture this. Two people in a meeting room. Voices rising, each one repeating the same points but with more volume, more tension, more frustration. Neither is listening, neither is learning, and neither has any real chance of winning, because the moment a debate becomes a battle, clarity disappears. Socrates understood this 2,400 years ago. He never tried to overpower people. He never tried to dominate the room. Instead, he let people collapse their own weak logic simply by guiding them with the right question at the right moment. And today, you'll learn the exact Socratic debate formula that disarms opponents without attacking, humiliating, or escalating. Let's start with why normal debates fail. Most debates collapse before they even begin. In modern conversations, people don't debate with reasoning, they debate with reflexes. The moment someone feels challenged, their mind switches from thinking to defending. And that's when everything falls apart. Here are the 3 reasons most debates fail. First, everyone tries to win, not understand. Most people listen only to reload, not to reflect. They wait for an opening to strike back, not to explore the truth. Second, emotion beats evidence. You can put the clearest logic on the table, but if the other person feels threatened, logic becomes irrelevant. Third, people defend identity, not ideas. If someone believes, "I'm the kind of person who's always right," any challenge feels like an attack on who they are, not what they said. Socrates understood a timeless rule. You can't change someone's mind while their ego is under attack. So Socrates changed the game. He never fought the person, only the assumptions. The strongest debater isn't the one who talks the most, but the one who reveals the most. Socrates understood something most modern debaters completely miss. You don't win by pushing harder, you win by guiding deeper. Instead of using verbal force, Socrates used gentle pressure. He didn't attack, he didn't dominate, he didn't lecture. He simply asked questions, calm, precise, and impossible to dodge. And slowly, the other person would expose their own contradictions. Picture this. An Athenian proudly declares he knows everything about justice. Socrates nods politely and asks, "Then tell me, what is justice?" The man gives an answer. Socrates asks a follow-up question, then another. And within minutes, the man realizes his idea collapses under its own weight. That's the magic of Socratic questioning. Questions turn debates into battles from discoveries, and people follow discoveries they make themselves. Now let's break down the Socratic debate formula. You can't debate thog. Most arguments collapse not because people are wrong, but because no one is talking about the same thing. 2 people, 2 definitions, 0 clarity. Socrates refused to enter a debate until the claim was carved in stone. His first question was always the same. What exactly do you mean? It sounds simple, almost too simple, but it disarms confusion instantly. Think about how often this plays out today. At work, person A says, "This idea isn't strategic." Socrates would ask, "What do you mean by strategic?" Suddenly, the argument isn't emotional anymore. It's specific. In relationships, someone says, "You never listen to me." What do you mean by never? In what moments do you feel unheard? The heat drops, the clarity rises. In politics, people shout freedom, fairness, justice, all without defining the words. Socratic questioning forces precision before passion. Because once someone defines their terms, the argument becomes grounded. Fog turns into structure, emotion turns into logic. And most importantly, half the conflict dies the moment the meaning becomes clear. Once the claim is clear, you move to the pressure point. Behind every opinion is a buried assumption. This is where Socrates was lethal, gently, quietly, and logically. He knew that most arguments don't fall apart at the surface level. They collapse at the foundation. Every statement someone makes depends on an invisible belief. Expose that belief, and the whole debate becomes clearer, calmer, and more honest. Socrates used a simple formula. What needs to be true for your statement to work? That one question digs straight into the hidden premise. Example, someone says, remote workers are lazy. Push it Socratically. What needs to be true for that to be accurate? They might answer, well, if I can't see them working, they're probably not working. There it is, the hidden premise. Visible activity equals productivity. And once that belief is out in the open, the conversation becomes logical, not emotional. You're no longer arguing about remote work, you're examining the assumption that productivity must be seen.
When the premise surfaces, the debate shifts. Less ego, more reasoning, fewer attacks, more clarity. Because people can defend opinions all day, but they struggle to defend assumptions they never realized they had. Now that you have the premise, here comes the turning point. These 3 questions can win any civil debate. Here's the heart of Socratic debating. A simple triad that quietly dismantles weak arguments without ever attacking the person. Socrates didn't use tricks. He used structure. And this is the structure. Clarification questions. What do you mean by that? Most debates collapse because no one is actually talking about the same thing. Clarification forces precision. It reduces emotional noise and exposes vague thinking. Evidence questions. How do you know that outcome is likely? Most people rely on vague news, not real data. Consequence questions. If this logic applies universally, what kind of work do you think would actually disappear first? They realize the claim needs nuance. Not all jobs vanish. Some change, some grow, some automate. The doom collapses under its own weight, and you never attacked them. This is the power of the triad. Clarity leads to reality, which leads to logic. By the end, people often soften their stance because they disproved their own exaggeration. But the real magic happens in step 4. The best way to change a mind is to let it collide with itself. Socrates never forced anyone to surrender their position. He simply held up a mirror and let their own beliefs bump into each other. This principle is about helping the other person see that 2 things they believe can't both be true at the same time. And when they notice the inconsistency, not you, their defensiveness melts almost instantly. Here's how Socrates did it. He repeated their earlier statements with total respect and curiosity, then gently compared them against their new claims. A simple, powerful question like, "But earlier you said X. How does that fit with Y?" forces the mind to pause, not to defend, but to reconcile. And the moment someone tries to reconcile a contradiction, they naturally adjust their position without feeling attacked, embarrassed, or defeated. You're not pushing them. You're not cornering them. You're guiding them to connect their own dots. Most people don't change their minds because of new information. They change because they notice their thinking doesn't line up. Socrates didn't break their argument. He simply let their argument break itself. This next principle stops debates from becoming emotional wars. Calmness is a debate weapon. Socrates never met emotion with emotion. He never raised his voice, rolled his eyes, or fired back with judgment. Instead, he used something far more powerful: mirroring. Mirroring is the art of reflecting the other person's words back to them with calm clarity. It shows respect. It slows the conversation down, and it makes the other person feel genuinely heard, which is the fastest way to lower defenses. Socrates relied on simple, steady phrases like, "So you're saying," or "Let me make sure I understand," or "Do you mean?" These aren't tricks, they're signals. Signals that you're not here to win. You're here to understand. When people feel understood, they unlock. They explain more. They soften. They actually think instead of react. And in that space of calm, the conversation shifts from a battle to a shared search for truth. Mirroring doesn't weaken your argument. It strengthens the relationship so the argument can finally be examined with clarity instead of ego. Then comes the technique that turns debates into teaching moments.
Warm. People rarely reject conclusions they reach on their own. Socrates understood a truth most modern debates forget. If you tell someone they're wrong, they resist. If you guide them to see it themselves, they shift. This is the heart of guided discovery, the art of leading someone toward clarity without ever forcing your conclusion on them. The formula is simple. Ask a guiding question, a question that points gently toward the flaw or gap in their reasoning. Let them think. Silence is not awkward. Silence is where their mind starts working. Ask the next logical step, a question that moves the thought forward without jumping ahead for them. Let them connect the dots. When they reach the conclusion on their own, the resistance vanishes. This is how you turn confrontation into cooperation. No ego, no battle, just a calm journey toward truth. Imagine someone making a heated political claim, emotional, absolute, unmovable. Instead of attacking, you break it into questions. What leads you to that? What would need to be true for that to work? How would this apply if the situation were reversed? Step by step, the intensity cools. They start seeing exceptions, nuance, and possibilities. And eventually, they soften their stance, not because you pushed them, but because you helped them see more than they saw before. This is leadership without domination, persuasion without pressure, the quiet power of guided discovery. And for the toughest debates, this final principle is essential. You win nothing if the person walks away humiliated. Socrates knew a truth many modern debaters forget. A debate doesn't end when the talking stops. It ends when both people walk away with dignity and tact. Even after exposing contradictions or guiding someone to rethink a belief, he never crushed their pride. He didn't win. He preserved the relationship so the conversation could grow later. And he did this with simple, graceful closings, lines that keep the final moment warm, not sharp. That was a thoughtful point. I appreciate how you approached this. We may disagree, but you gave me something to think about. These phrases do something powerful. They turn a debater into a partner. They convert tension into mutual respect. They make the other person feel seen rather than defeated. When someone leaves a debate feeling respected, not shamed, their mind stays open, and they'll be far more willing to talk with you again. This is how Socrates transformed conflict into connection. This is how you turn opponents into allies. Now let's put everything together. You've now learned the full blueprint, the same quiet strategy Socrates used to turn heated arguments into moments of clarity. First, define the claim so you're not debating fog. Then find the hidden premise, the belief beneath the belief. From there, use the Socratic triad to clarify, test evidence, and explore consequences. Next, reveal contradictions gently, letting their own ideas collide. And throughout the conversation, mirror instead of attack, keeping the ego calm. Then, use guided discovery, helping them reach the insight themselves. And finally, exit with dignity, so the conversation ends with respect, not regret. Because in the end, questions don't overpower people, they empower clarity. And clarity is how you win debates without ever raising your voice. If this opened your eyes to the power of Socratic questions, subscribe and let's rebuild civil debate with ancient wisdom.